Institute of Oriental Languages and Civilizations and the French Institute for East Asian Research, and I'm currently writing a PhD thesis on modern Japanese religion. During my research, I've studied the process of modernization of the Japanese body through the cases of gymnastics and the link between martial arts and religion through the cases of Aikido and Shorinji Kempo. Even though this theme is quite marginal in my PhD research, it is linked to my personal life as I'm training for about 15 years now, including, let's say, non-religious martial arts such as freestyle Kempo and BJJ, but also explicitly religious ones such as Japanese Buddhist Shorinji Kempo that I mentioned. So I will have the pleasure to be discussing for this panel entitled Analytical Methodologies, Inner and Outer Perspectives, along with Fanny Caron and Laurent Schirkop-Reyes. So I think everyone now knows Laurent. So Fanny, could you introduce yourself, please, and tell us more about your research?
Sure. Hi, and welcome to all of you. So I'm Fanny Caron. I have a PhD in language and literatures of Asia with a focus on Chinese studies from Aix-Marseille University. In my dissertation, which was entitled From Ancestral Orator to Contemporary Literature of the Dakota P and the Paiwan, Histories of Trans-Indigenous Resilience. I use my training in both the fields of general and comparative literature and of Chinese study to produce multi, inter, and transdisciplinary work. So I use this transversal epistemological approach in my study of indigenous orature and literature, where the writings of the Paiwan and Dakota P authors, which are both indigenous people, to analyze the works, have been analyzed not only from a literary and stylistic standpoint, but also from an anthropological one. So I'm currently an associate researcher with the Eurasia Research Unit, and my research topics include Paiwan and Dakota P history, indigenous peoples' literatures and art, resilience literature, minorities and atypical people in literature, relationship with nature and the environment, the role of women within community, etc. So that's diverse topics. And although this research might seem far from our current conference, I found this interdisciplinary panel very enlightening as it proves the necessity in academia of the integration of multiple perspectives in order to move beyond the frontiers of our own cultural biases and to truly, fully understand the nature of any search field. So thank you all for your participation, and thanks for to the conference organizers who have put in a lot of time and effort to make this virtual conference possible. And now I will let Edouard explain how this panel will unfold.
Thank you. So you have American blood, right? Based on your accent.
Sorry, yes, I grew up for a time in the US, so sorry.
No, it's a good thing. So I would like to, first of all, to thank the organizers of the 6th Martial Arts Studies Conference, especially Laurent and Gabrielle for the amazing work they have done to make this online event possible. Yeah, merci. And I also thank all of you for your stimulating presentations. I was very impressed by their different perspectives coming from scholars who are also practitioners, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can combine or confront them during the discussion. Too many questions came to my mind while listening to you, but we'll be short on time here because we have an hour and a half. We can be a little bit longer, but we'll try not to be too long. The current discussion will consist of 2 rounds. The first one consisting of individual questions asked to each presenter by the discussants, so we'll try to keep it to 30 minutes. And the second one consisting of a broader discussion aiming at grasping together more general insights and reflections, so maybe around 45 minutes. During the first round, we will ask the presenter a few precise questions concerning the content of the presentation, And the idea will be for Fanny, Laurent, and I to pave the way to the general discussion with these questions. We will try to keep it to short answers. This will be hard, I guess, but we'll try on specific aspects that will be talked in more details during the general discussion. During the second round, we will try to make a quick overview of all the presentations while asking a few broad questions to launch the discussion. So the idea is to have a free exchange, and during which everyone, even the people from outside the participants, can share his or her reflections, comments, and questions. So I'll start with the first round and with the presentation of Six Wetzler, who's not here, unfortunately, but will act as if he's here, although we won't have the answers, but he can answer later by email or by writing to everyone. So the first presentation was done by Six Wetzler, who is curator of the I'm sorry for my bad German accent, Deutsches Klingen Museum, German Blade Museum. His inspiring paper was entitled Martial Arts and Religion, an Evident Connection, ? And was dealing with the mystification of martial arts and the place of religion within this process, especially in Western societies, also mentioning some influential mystifying/mystified masters, such as Master Yoda from Star Wars, and identifying trajectories of mystification. His talk was inspired by Thomas Luckmann's work, and he proposed the stimulating three terms typology in order to grasp the relationship between martial arts and religion. So the three patterns were religion as a function subordinate to martial arts, which was quite common according to him, martial arts as a function subordinate to religion, which was uncommon, and martial arts as a substitute religion, this third one being particularly representative of Western cases, according to Sixth. So I would have liked to ask the next question to Sixth. So would he link the martial art as a substitute religion pattern as a product of Western societies or as a product of modern societies in general? And of course, the two are linked, but it's not the same thing, I think. And could we have examples from non-Western cases of such mystification and try to put them in a historical point of view to have this historical dynamics? He's not here, so I hope we'll have the answer one day. And now I just let Fanny present the second and third presentation.
Okay. Well, first of all, I will also apologize for my probable mispronunciation of your names. But the second presentation is by Noora Ronkainen. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
that's
good.
From the University, this is going to be terrible, of Jyväskylä. And go ahead, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, it's Jyväskylä in Finnish.
It's
a Jyväskylä.
Yeah, okay.
It's a terrible name. I'm sorry about that.
Sorry. It is entitled, Is This Spirituality? Exploring Reflective Writings on the Spiritual in Martial Arts. So the research is co-conducted with Anna Kavura, Heli Siltala, and Olli Tikkanen. Sorry. Noora's presentation focuses on a fluid and constant evolving concept of spirituality and its link to martial arts. In martial arts, the spiritual dimension is perhaps far more intensely present and palpable than in any other sport. Noora also introduced an innovative methodology consisting of autoethnography. Spirituality then appears to be interwoven with issues such as finding meaning in practice, shared or confronting values, experiencing transcendence, as well as tension during competitions. Noora also puts the relationship between martial arts and spirituality in perspective with other sports, emphasizing the fact that martial arts tend to be spreading between eye and you. So I would therefore like to ask a question concerning the idea of spirituality to Nora. Although the definition of spirituality is rather problematic, but would you say that spirituality is more about the inner self, whether religion implies outer experiences, expression, symbols, etc.?
Yeah, thanks for your question. And so, yeah, what I was putting up front in the presentation is that it's a tricky field to be doing your research because there is no consensus about what is religion and what is spirituality. So what I had in one of my slides is that there are some psychologists of religion who would consider spirituality as one component of religion. So it would be this inner kind of, or your personal spiritual practices that are within this broader framework of religion. So if you're a Christian, then praying is your spiritual practice. So it's kind of gaining meaning within that religious framework. But so kind of more often what we see in scholarship now and kind of what the trend seems to be is that now we are talking more about spirituality that is something that is shared by all humanity. So whether you are a religious person or not, and kind of spirituality is more related to our search for meaning and questions like why is life worth living, like what is valuable and what is worthwhile. If we have one life, what is kind of the purpose of my existence and what is it that I'm supposed to be doing here? So that's kind of this more existential philosophical framework and kind of this broader approach, and that's kind of what we have used in our research as well. So in the first discussions we had, we saw that people have different ideas about what is spirituality, so we just wanted to be very explorative and let's just write very broadly and we see what comes up, and then we can in the end say that, okay, half of the stuff we write is not relevant or whatever is the conclusion, but that was the starting point for us.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much for your answer. Should we go on to the third presentation then? Okay. The third presentation, entitled Methodological Challenges and the Potential of Self-Reflecting Writing is from Anna Kavura.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The University of Brighton and I forgot again, Uvalskala. Sorry. She is also a member of the previous research team, and Anna provides us with a very detailed review of literature focusing on a sample of empirical studies dealing with martial arts and spirituality. She points out that there is no precise definition of the concept of spirituality and exposes the potential of an autoethnographic methodology based on self-reflecting writing, a methodology which holds out the prospect of self-transformation for athletes and of conceptualized understanding for researchers. So it indeed appears in her case that spirituality emerged through the writing experience, which in turn became a performative practice. So I would then like to ask a question concerning the process of writing to Anna. To Anna. So do you think that writing as a reflective exploration of your practice coming from an introspective effort is the path to uncover an underlying spirituality in opposition to religion, which always carries an external dimension? Did you understand my question, or
Yes, I think so. Thank you for this. Thank you for this question. Yes, what we try to say in my presentations was that we think that this method has the potential to provide rich insights in this complex phenomena, and I think it was like very much linked also to Tabata's presentation. She was also saying about how through storytelling and self-reflection we can gain this kind of knowledge. So I think we are Yes, at least I am planning on continuing with self-reflective writing as a method for kind of like gaining access to this kind of data and phenomena.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if I have answered the question or it is.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. And we will have more time afterwards anyway to maybe explore further. So, Gabrielle, do you want to go on with the fourth presentation?
Yes.
Sorry, not Gabrielle. I'm so sorry, Edouard.
Okay. Yeah, we're short on time, so let's just think of that as a warming up session to warm everyone for the discussion. So the fourth presentation was done by Gabriel Guarino de Almeida, doctoral student from the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio and specialist of Chinese martial arts. His paper was entitled The Energy Manifests Itself, Techniques of Body, Performance and Agency in Tai Chi Chuan, and consisted of a reading of the practice of Tai Chi Chuan based on the idea of Qi, through the lens of Alfred Gell's concept of agency applied to art. Gabriel invited us to use conceptually the term Qi and to think about martial arts in terms of prototypes, artists, and index having an effect on the recipient as suggested by his drawings and his Komodo statue. And through a qualitative approach, it's kind of close, in my opinion, to an engaged research, he showed that Qi was perceived as an unconscious agent flowing from inside the movement. Thus, this energy could be considered as an agent as well as the master, I think, able to affect the body as an index and finally influence the recipient. So I would like to ask two questions. First, could we compare the Qi to a kind of artistic inspiration that also acts as a shared value binding a social group? And second, could the eye of the master, not the eye of the tiger, the eye of the master be considered as an agent during the process of learning?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the question and for the summarize. Actually, you just you made it better than I would do, like to summarize the work. And actually, as you said, that this idea of this proposal to analyze Tai Chi Chuan through this anthropology of art theory came out of a sort of exploratory fieldwork of my doctoral research, where I was in an environment of practice of Tai Chi Chuan from the competitive perspective. There were like athletes, and of course in the course there was like many practitioners from different places, but they were like supposed to be working on a young style of standard Tai Chi Chuan for competition, for international patterns of the International Wushu Federation and stuff. Then what happened is that at first I thought that we would just like be working on very calisthenic terms and from physical education to do the correction. But actually what happened is that the patterns of correction of the instructors were very much more about allowing the body through movement for something to happen, for something to emerge. And that was like the terms that were like appearing on the discussion. So, and that's why it kept me like worried about a previous question that I have, which was, since I'm practitioners of other style of Chinese martial arts, I have no much experience on internal style. So there was this question, which is somehow is a broader question that everyone should like, what's the link between this religion and the spirituality and stuff? And what I saw that there wasn't even a question for them, for those practitioners. There wasn't even a question, because Qi emerges much more a kind of something that happens in the body. So in this point, it's exactly the same thing that Alfred Gell is proposing as the inspiration on an artist, or if you in this ethnographic example that he's working with, like magic and like the ideas of the to put magic to work for, you have like some results in the craftsmanship of a boat, which is like his example. Because for him, the importance is like not exactly how to essentialize this thing that's causing effects, but actually the process of causing effects, which is like binding the social relation. So it might be the same, not the same thing, but also in a process of like mapping the effects and how it comes to happen in social relations. It might be the same thing, I would say. Right? Mm-hmm. And that answers a questions, not answered, like it puts a question that I'm trying to work on my research with. What's the place of creativity in martial art? Like, how do we think about that? Because I know that we have a discussion about the term martial arts and it's applicable and all the discussion about martiality and everything, but even though we call ourselves like martial artists, right? So if it's artists from which point of view? Like, where's the creativity and how we feel our expression? It might be something like this. Like when I was like reading some work on poetry, and there was like some poets like said, I don't write, actually the poetry comes and then then it goes like through, which is like the same word that was talking in this Tai Chi class that I was working to. So at the same point, I think that the idea of the master is also an agent, because if you take this idea of Gel's prototype, you always like, this is just a framework of analysis from a point of view. So you can like always change where is everyone. So if I'm doing Tai Chi on a park, let's suppose there's no a specific recipient for my performance. Let's say I'm just doing the recipient's myself, right? So I'm doing something to produce effects on me, like. But by the time that I realize that I'm on a room practicing with my master, there's another performance. And even though we do the same thing, like it's another, because it somehow affects what I'm doing. And for my personal practice, this is not like a ethnographic point. This is just like my personal practice. That happens a lot, but because in some patterns of practice of the Chinese martial arts here in Brazil, we do have to change the practice in order to, like, when I do in front of my master, it's more traditional, not so much acrobatics, and when I do in the competition, that's another thing. But so it's another way to also make these links to see that there are different performances, but they are not only on the personal like practitioners, but also on the very broader sense of the environment and the social relations that are on it. Sorry for talking that much. Hope that I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. We will, I think, discuss this point during the discussion, of course. Thank you. So finally, and we will be on time, finally, the fifth presentation was done by Tabata Castelo Branco Teles from the University of São Paulo, and her paper was entitled Framing Spirituality in Martial Arts, an Embodied Comprehension Through Phenomenology. So it consisted of an application of a phenomenological framework inspired, for example, by the work of Merleau-Ponty in order to grasp spirituality within martial arts. And Tabata describes martial arts as an embodied practice in which movement is oriented by space or by the world. I don't remember the word you used. And body is thus moved by a specific intention that is also oriented by otherness, as the situation of martial arts implies someone else. So this other is dealt with the creation of a habit through learning and the search of spirituality. Inspired by phenomenology, she sees the body as a subject and an object at the same time, engaged in a practice ruled by sensible norms. She also links spirituality to an effort of reflecting on your practice and finding meaning in it. So it links with the previous presentation. So I would like to ask the following question to Tabata. Do you think martial arts are something similar to a play, where even if there are not explicit rules are limiting the practice, so it would end as a complex of body intentions, confrontation to otherness, and tacit rules from which spirituality helps at finding a kind of unified meaning?
Well, first, thanks for summarizing it, because I guess I also wouldn't be able to do it like you did. And thanks for the question. Actually, I didn't explore that much, but we have a concept that we use when I say we is me and my supervisor, which is corporal fighting. So when we're considering corporal fighting, we're considering some sort of essential intention, which means I try to grab the other one or to hit the other person, and this person is trying to do exactly the same thing with me. But it can be as a play, a game, as a brawl, as a duel, as, we have lots of different ways of doing it. So I guess this is the point, because you have a specific purpose when you fight, but you can also vary in a lot of different ways. So this is why I started to think about storytelling and reflection processes, because even if we're considering, when I consider spirituality, I consider it pretty much as a pre-reflexive process, because you can't explain how you do it, how it comes, but it's strong enough to enable some sort of movements and gestures. But if you don't reflect on that, you won't even know it happened. So I don't know if I'm answering properly your question, but I think that we have lots of concepts which are really tied. So it's a complex phenomenon. So this is how I would start, at least.
Okay. Laurent, have you a quick question, maybe?
No, she just answered my question, actually, because I was thinking about the same thing, and just let's go ahead, and I will see if I have another question during the discussion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So, Fanny, would you like to introduce the second round now that everyone is ready to fight?
Sorry, I muted myself. So yeah, let's move on to the general discussion. First of all, in a way, it seems that spirituality and martial arts is a way to make sense out of the chaos, both inner chaos in a reflective way, and then outer chaos in a more modern and globalized world that could be on the brink of collapse. Since we live in an era that is plagued by the scourge of fake news, and as Six and Gabriel's presentations have shown, stereotypes are very much present in all forms of arts and culture, including martial arts. So through their multi-dimensional methodological approaches, academia can be a platform on which the erroneous notion and popular mystification spread through the media and pop culture can be dispelled. Also, what is evident in all presentation is that the very definition of spirituality seems problematic, as well as multifaceted and multifarious. Hence, we really need to approach spirituality and martial arts from various perspectives, something that Noura, Anna, Heli, and Ollie have done. It seems that both Noura and Anna's presentation were based on a collaborative project between 4 researchers that gathered a year of their own diary entries, as well as a wide scope of academic literature. And to me, it was really an original explorative approach and methodology that focuses on the very difficult to define concept of spirituality in martial arts practices. And perhaps because these practices are not studied from mere observations of the sports, but really from an insider's perspective, the 4 researchers on this project all have an in-depth practical experience of martial art. So it was possible to give the elusive concept of spirituality a more physical and easier to grasp form in the domain of martial arts. Such an approach was also put forward by Tabata, who uses phenomenology to study spirituality in martial arts. It is really through inner perception and its outer effect that is the way our body our body moves or acts, that we can access the world. That's my take from your work, Tabata. And mind and body are interlinked in the practice of martial arts, as well as the self and the other who interact whilst fighting. Also, another recurrent theme is the quest of meaning and purpose through the practice of martial arts that Six mentioned also in his presentation. And it seems that Nora, Anna, along with Heli and Ollie, also endeavor to find and define meaning in the practice of martial arts. Such as unity between mind and body, or the possibility for self-transformation. But it seems also that this meaning can be lost when these practices become sources of anxiety, for instance, in reason of its competitive nature. So in the end, it is interesting to put the practice of martial arts in perspective with human relations and not only spirituality. So what do you think, Edouard?
Thank you. Thank you for this insightful comment. I think maybe everyone is starting to grasp tracks in which walk from now. From my point of view, this panel is in the end dealing mainly with the question of methodology, of methods, and all the presentation helped us understanding how it is difficult, as Fanny said, to grasp such words, of course spirituality, but also martial arts and religion, a situation that presenters have tackled with efforts of typology, definition, a conceptualization of emic, of vernacular terms, philosophical frameworks such as existentialism in a way, and phenomenology. And this plurality reflects the complexity of this relationship, forcing us to use multiple approaches to study it. Indeed, as it has been noted, for example, by Peter Lorge during the discussion of the panel 3, I think, martial arts are more than just physical movements, but that more is very hard to grasp, as your insights on religion and spirituality have clearly shown, I think. I thus wonder, I'm just throwing some questions during the discussion, so sorry about that. I thus wonder if you have seen any possible links or, on the contrary, contradictions between your approaches, between Sixth typology, Nora and Anna's autoethnography, Gabriel's agency, and Tabata's phenomenology. I personally see links between a kind of Western quest for spirituality within martial arts, introspective questionings influenced by existentialist ideas such as intention and meaning, and the amount of freedom that we have in these intentions, agency of energetic principles as being part of the movements, and phenomenological understanding of body practices based on intentionality and perception shaped by space. But also some tensions between our common understanding of the words spirituality and religion and the aims of our research on martial arts, I think. In a way, it reminds me of such great themes as the relationship between body and mind, the difference between religion and religiosity, or faith and belief, the idea of non-religious rituals, non-religious faith, and of course the links between the inside and the outside through the mediation of the body and its movements. As noted by Sixt and Paul Bowman in the very rich closing discussion, I hope everyone saw it this morning, it also leads us to think reflexively about our categories, our own categories, and the links between spirituality and religion, and between martiality, and martial arts as different but intertwined phenomenon, or even on the value of such differences. Is it relevant to differentiate spirituality and religion and martiality and martial arts? That was a question Sixt asked, I think. So when I listened to your presentations, I couldn't help but to wonder if martial arts could be understood as rituals in which religious symbols, discourses, and aims can be strongly, lightly, or not at all emphasized, depending on the cases. This point was also evocated by Daniel Palmer, I think during panel 4, discussion, as he mentioned ritualized fights, practice common to both humans and animals, so bearing a universal value, and martial arts as being maybe only one expression of such practices. Of course, thinking about ritual leads us to think about playing, that is acting according to certain rules, explicit or not, in order to produce a certain effect on yourself and your playing partner, if you're playing with someone. I also wondered if martial arts could be a new form of religiosity expressed through what we could call a martial spirituality, elaborated mainly on idealized views of ancient martial practices, usually from Far Eastern countries. In the case of modern Japan, which is my field of study, this idealization of ancient martial arts, which we can call kobujutsu or kobudo, is a very strong dynamics during the modern period, actually, and quite antagonist to the sportivization, I don't know if this word exists in English, of the practice based on principles of unification of body and mind, sometimes spirit, sometimes soul, and martial arts are thus linked to a religious ideal of cosmic unity. By the way, these last words I've just said should be a focus of attention because spirituality comes from the word spirit, but in non-Western societies, spirit is often clearly associated to religion, whereas mind is more of a psychological concept. The concept of soul and heart, maybe in Asian context, should be also included in such reflection. And as we are all non-native English speakers, we can wonder in an etymological and epistemological reflection if the equivalence of these words in our native language carry the same meaning as English ones. In French, for example, we only have the word esprit that covers the meaning of both spirit and mind, depending on the context. Whereas in Japanese, you have the word de or tama equals spirit in a religious way, while the word seishin, which is pretty new actually, equals mind in a psychological way. So this question on vocabulary can, of course, be extended to the words religion, which it's a major focus of attention in religious studies, and martial arts, which is the purpose of this meeting too. And in Japan, again, the common word that we use, budo, that maybe everyone knows, I guess, is a quite recent construct and carries a strong idealization in it. So, in a way, in Western countries, but also in modern societies in general, which are, of course, influenced by the West, a modernity founded on rational ideals reenacting great dualisms always tend to push certain actors to reunite separated elements. These are leaders, such as martial arts master, who concretely share common points, in my opinion, with popular religious leaders. In this perspective, the parallel between founding a martial art, a style, or a school, and founding a religious movement seems important to me. And this would bring a more Max Weber's perspective on the question through the question of power, charisma, and leaders trying to shape the world with their communitarian groups. And this is clearly the case of Aikido, for example, which was founded within a new religious movement. And so disciples joining the founder's teaching thus appeared in search not only for body training, but also for religious transcendence and spiritual guidance. I just have two more comments because I'm already being too long, I think. And if after that Laurent wants to add something before the discussion. The first one is the place of the third party in martial art practice. Whether it being a training partner, an opponent, a teacher, and maybe the public in the context of competition. And so the influence or agency, to borrow Gabriel's word, of these others appears quite important in shaping the practice and within the emergence of a spiritual side of this practice. I think, for example, of Randall Collins' theory of interaction rituals, if you know that, and conflict. It's quite interesting. And Georges Favreau also mentioned the importance of considering vertical and horizontal interactions during panel 5 discussion. In a more phenomenological perspective, the third party could complete the dual body space pattern in a way, I think. So it also leads me to the question of practicing alone, which I think, Nora, you evocated this in your presentation, which is present in martial arts, including forms or kata in Japanese, during which you symbolically fight imaginary opponents or maybe yourself sometimes. For example, in Shorinji Kempo, kata are in the sense considered as a form of moving meditation. In Japanese, we say dozen, with the characters of moving and zen, that can be performed alone or with a partner. In another perspective, while I was preparing this discussion, I was reading the autobiography of Aoki Shinya, who is a Japanese MMA champion. Maybe some of you knows him. Who describes the fact that his early problem of not being able to build normal social relationship has become the base of his martial arts learning, focused on not listening to his teacher's advice, not paying attention to the opponent behavior, and act in his own way. So in his case, of course, it's autobiography, so he's putting things the way he wants to put it. But the effect of the third party seems to come from the negation of the otherness, or from his own construction as a form of absolute otherness from the point of view of the others. I don't know if I'm very clear with that. And the last thing, and it's really the last thing, the question of flow, energy, rhythm. Always a kind of watery metaphors that implies transcendence through movement, and these kind of perspectives reminds me somehow of trance phenomena performed through dancing, for example, or violent movements. And this also bounds martial arts and religious practices involving internal and external elements. So could we see martial arts practice as a form of trance, provoking an outer body experience, aspect that we could also find in maybe other sports, I guess? Okay, I'm done. Thank you. So Laurent, do you have some insights or questions before letting everybody express?
Yeah, perhaps a very short comment about while I was listening to Gabriel about the definition of cosmological concepts, especially in the Chinese context, in the Chinese culture context. I was thinking about two references. The first one is this one from Marcel Granet. I think everybody has, I mean, in Chinese study, you know him, right? But I think it will be good to have to read again the parts where he was trying to describe the concept of qi in the Chinese culture, and the second one is Christopher Schipper. It's in French, sorry, but it's the
Taoist body.
Yeah, the Taoist body, yeah. And Christopher Schipper was also talking about the concept of religion in the Chinese context in this book, and I think it may be kind of a help to describe, to make a definition of the idea of a religion in the Chinese context. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So who wants to talk? It's okay. It's open floor, open mat.
Yeah, maybe I can start with a few things and observations. So, yeah, I really appreciate all the summaries of everybody's presentations and the really, really good questions. So it was a really nice way of setting the scene. So I guess kind of watching so many other presentations as well, like one of the things that comes across is that is martial arts something that is special in terms of having this spiritual component that is kind of built in? And I think in this conference there have been several presentations that are also challenging it, that there isn't, that you can use martial arts also to other means. And so I guess that would be one of my questions to Tabata as well, in terms of when you're talking about martial arts and spirituality as this kind of pre-reflective, kind of inbuilt component of the martial art practice. So in terms of when I was talking about the different definitions of spirituality, do we take it as something that is kind of shared in all humanity, that it exists in all of us, is it just sleeping, or are we kind of that it's in all of us, but some of us are just ignoring this spiritual element and we can become aware of it through martial art practices? Or is it something that kind of is more developed and is not innate and built in? And so I guess just a remark in terms of these other ways of moving that we talked about, that I also studied, like I did several studies on spirituality in running, and that's very much in the popular culture. There are so many books about spirituality in running that are available in the bookstores. So it's not just martial arts. So I think it's part of this kind of growing interest in spirituality. So spirituality in the workplace, finding meaningful work, finding meaningful activities like meaningful leisure, spiritual leisure. So I think it's in all walks of life, and it's something that is kind of becoming interesting for people, both for academics and in the popular culture. So yeah, maybe I can forward to Tabata and kind of your thoughts on the spiritual component in martial arts.
So, Tabata, do you want to answer now? Or I saw a virtual hand raised. So, 2 virtual hand raised.
Do I answer right now, or do I wait?
Are the questions directly linked to the to Nora's question? If so, it may be interesting to take them now.
Okay, I was just writing and trying to make some relations, especially because when you were talking about spirituality, it reminded me of flow that Edouard has just considered. And I don't know if I said that in my presentation, but when I first realized this aspect of spirituality was when I was interviewing a capoeirista, a capoeira practitioner. And capoeira, there's a very strong relationship with the music and the rhythm. So people play following the same rhythm and the same music. And it is also related with the third part person, because this is the master, which the master is the person that chooses the song and the rhythm according to the game he wants people to do. So I was interviewing this practitioner, and suddenly we started to listen to the music. It was far because we were sitting on a bench, so it was really far, but it was somehow strong enough that he started to tell me that it was like if we were inside the roda, inside the circle of capoeira, because his body wanted to be there and to go there, and he started to feel the magic. That's the term he used. He started to feel the magic and etc. And we weren't playing capoeira. We were just talking, and it was just an interview. But because of the song, he started to feel all those meaningful and magical aspects of that practice. So it's also related to, again, perception, because in capoeira we have a very strong perception related to hearing and feeling it through hearing a song. in other practices such as karate, for example, we keep a distance and we see the other through the distance. For example, in BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is a tactical perception. We feel the other, we feel the weight of the other. Sometimes if we won't do anything if we just try to see the other, we must feel. So I guess spirituality, again, is very related to perception and with this kind of flow, depending on the martial art that we're talking about. So it can be, what I'm trying to say is that it can be meaningful in a lot of different ways, starting from how we perceive things. I hope this is clear. Some random thoughts, maybe.
There are 3 raised hands now.
Thank you. Just that sounded a lot shamanistic to me. It's maybe a deformation from religious studies. Sorry.
I think so.
So we'll take the question in order. So it was Mr. Beck, Mr. Frank, and Mr. Talaga. So please.
Actually, less questions. This idea of flow as being part really of that spirituality and flow is for very many people the same thing. So, for example, if I go and do a kata in Shaolin Kempo or do a form in Tai Chi Chuan, as soon as I feel the energy moving my body and not myself through my mind going through the form, this is certainly like a kind of spiritual experience very much. It's a flow experience that you have here. Especially Taoism, where Laurent showed this Qian symbol, how the energies are going each other, creating each other, one of the next, which especially in Tai Chi is very much that one leads to the other to the next. So there's one thing feeding into the next thing, and this then creates a flow that the movement is always there. And this is very much, I think, a personal experience that martial arts give us. On the other hand, you have, for me, religion is always something that is very, very structured and very interactive between persons. So there you have rules on how to act to each other. So you get into the dojo, you have the dojo rules, how you bow to each other, how you greet each other, what are the rules for fighting or for sparring or whatever. That is where you get, in a way, religious in what you do, and in a way it's certainly dogmatic a bit. And as soon as you can have internalized all these structures, and then you go into a flow, into the framework that the structures give you, that gives you then the freedom to experience spirituality again. Of course, on a simple shamanistic level that you mentioned, Edouard, then of course you don't need the structure, because you live in nature, then you have this experience and everything is fine because you're inside nature. But if you're in society and you have found a distance to what your natural state is, then you need the structure to find the freedom again, to get into flow or to become spiritual again.
Thank you very much. So yeah, it's the idea of finding freedom within a framework, a limiting framework, actually. But through this, you can access a kind of transcendence, a freedom, a feeling of flow, etc. Yeah, Mr. Frank, you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, well, a little of both. First of all, thank you for, there's so many fascinating papers and so much interesting work going on in the panel and the whole conference on this topic. I think the main thing I was thinking about really are some of the methodological questions that have been brought up and how important those are in this type of research. And it made me think of Eugene Herrigel and the Zen in the art of archery, which probably most of you have read somewhere, but you should if you haven't. It's a great book, but I'm actually thinking of the critique of that book by Shoji Yamada. Okay, so Harrigal, if you're not familiar, in the 1930s was a professor in Japan and took up the study of archery and studied quite intensely for about 5 years with a very Zen-oriented teacher. And he wrote a book about, this being the essence of archery. But Shoji Yamada, who's also a master archer, contemporary, responded with a very serious critique of that work, saying that really this is quite a narrow, specialized interpretation of archery from this one teacher. And while that's an historical treatment, if you're doing, it sounds like many of you are taking some sort of ethnographic methodology as part of your work, that how important it is to be very precise and strict about getting the variety of voices in the room of your book, right, or work. So just a comment to kind of go back to that idea of that it's easy and fun. I think the problem is it's fun to generalize about spirituality and martial arts. I think we inescapably are caught in that, not only in the West, but very much so, for example, in China, very much so, but that is a product of modernity. It's not a truth per se. It's a specific product of specific historical circumstances. So that said, my question is, and anybody can address this, what particular methodological problems have you found so far? And what kind of innovations or experiments have you done with your own methodology to try and resolve those problems? Go on mute here.
Answer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So if the presenters want to answer, please. Yeah, Gabriel.
Yeah, I was like with a hand, so this is already the, because the point that the Professor Adam talked about is actually what I'm really going on right now, because if I was to make the presentation today, it was like be a kind of different with some points that I've been working with, because I think that the points that, since I'm in a kind of ethnographic perspective to do the field work and this kind of stuff, I'm kind of shy to make some general assumptions that we have like some broader connection between like spirituality, or even though just in two ways. First, in a kind of take some bias from like a modernist perspective to look to the data that I have, and from another perspective, which is a kind of a danger of this kind of work, is to take the semic notions and put them like as a broader category. Like just because one of the guys that I interviewed said that for him Tai Chi is like a religion, so I just like, okay, so it's just like, I guess there's a religion component over there. So because what I think is that by the time that we all like being like in modernity and colonized by the same kind of process in different ways, like in different parts of the world, but I guess my problem now is to find like a common way to make the analysis available in order to make available for the reader. What is the amic notions that appear, like, okay, they're talking about chi, they're talking about yin and yang, but how they are talking about them, because it might be different from the way that I've been working or reading on the Marcel Granet book, because like he's doing another kind of perspective of this. Of course, it might be some connection, because some of them even are reading the same stuff that I am. This is what's so funny in the martial arts community, because we all like doing the same thing, like in different aspects of it. But how can I provide this, like what is going on in the field, like from the perspective that I'm in, but also to propose some analytical perspectives that come to help the analysis. For instance, I do have a personal problem with the idea of religion as a concept, like something that appears in every like kind of manifestation. I think the religion, from the perspective that I'm working with, is much more like a figure, like a great figure, or a kind of discipline that we happen to see in some ways emerging, But if you take like some aspect of the practice, they are talking about grace, they are talking about flow, and then it comes to this direct as a religious experience. I don't guess that works from the point that I'm working with. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying that I'm kind of afraid to this disconnection. So I've been working on the work of the anthropologist Gregory Bateson. He kind of a kind of interesting approach on this idea of grace, like something that we look for, that's a kind of undefined concept, but something that we feel, that like this fulfillment that we have, and then we find this fulfillment some in religion, we find in art, we find in another kind of practice. So it might be a way to explicit something Edouard was talking about, like, of course, there's a link. We can see it from the different perspectives, but how this link operates, I don't have the question. I hope that I won't find it, but I'm just like circling this kind of problem, because that's my problem. But which happens to my question, if I'm allowed to make a question to the works of Anna, and I'm sorry, I can't read your name again. The works of this point of making the ethnographic work on a kind of a group, and then how these words come from, because I do have this doubt, because something I was in a kind of a ballet class, and I was doing ballet for some years, and then there was a day that my master of ballet, I call it master, she said no, you know when you're doing the movement right, because you feel like something good inside, like you feel that you're good. And then there was just the same thing that the Tai Chi professor said, but the difference was for the ballet teacher, there was something that I made this good thing, like this is a intentionality for myself, because I do master the technique. For the Tai Chi master, it was like something that happened on my body, like the chi flows. Actually, the feeling is a kind of the same, but the way that they look at it, this is why I think that agency, even though it's a very problematic concept, is come to be good in this kind of analyze, because it makes you how the framework is going on. But this is sort of a question and a lot of doubts, and sorry for the long the long talk.
Okay. So it's a question of perspective.
Thank you very much. I think now every hands are raised, basically. So I don't know.
Did you ask a question to Nora and Anna, or?
Yeah, I think everyone could react to the previous two questions and comments. So just if anybody wants to talk now,
jump in.
Just go on. Yeah.
I would like to say something in relation to Adam's question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, like regarding the methodological problems that we met in our collaborative ethnography, I think one our main problem was like we were constantly, when we started writing our diaries, we were constantly reading each other's entries and then wondering, is this spirituality that we are writing about? Is this spirituality? And then we tried to solve this problem by reading other people's texts and research and discussing it. And this is why we ended up doing a kind of scoping review of the literature that I try to present a part of it. And but I don't know if we solved our problem, because in most of the study there are many very interesting studies and very interesting theoretical papers out there. But in most of the cases, as Sixth was saying in his presentation, there is this discourse that spirituality or religion is kind of naturally connected to martial arts. So martial arts are framed as a spiritual activity. But then it doesn't always go, there were studies saying that, for example, engaging in martial arts practices increases martial arts thoughts, spiritual thoughts to the participants. But what are these spiritual thoughts? So is this the things that we were writing about? Are these spiritual experiences? So that was our problem. And now, in relation to Gabriel's presentation. I also agree that maybe, you know, like we are trying, is it like a Western kind of way of trying to research things, that we are trying to have like a very clear definitions for every context, and sometimes it is not always possible, because these are like fluid and very kind of complex and like time and content kind of related phenomena. So, but
yeah, I'm just going to respond in 10 seconds to that. I think that's brilliant. And also, Gabriel, with what you mentioned earlier about poetry, maybe these creative or artistic processes are methodological solutions as well, as opposed to separate sort of interpretive processes. So we tend to think, you know, in the very, you know, we have to do social science, right? Or we have to do anthropology, or we have to do history. But, you know, maybe we actually need these creative or artistic means to interpret those experiences, especially if they're given to us in that way. People aren't necessarily speaking poetry to us, but they may be telling us stories that have more than a personal, they may have a creative element to them. So I don't know, maybe that's a solution for working through our own questions about whether what we're hearing is spiritual. How are we responding to it in an intuitive or creative way? That's kind of out there, but just made me think of that. So thanks.
And
Thank you very much.
if I can,
Nora?
yeah, just like a couple of words to continue with Anna. So those are all Anna was already like addressing the issues, but I think we also, because we have these different kind of social developments or kind of more cultural developments in terms of how spirituality has been taken up in the public discourse and the research discourse as well. So flow was already mentioned, and that's something that in the 80s, the studies of flow were kind of situating that in the spiritual and religious frame. So kind of that flow is a spiritual component, or that's a spiritual experience, whereas kind of sports psychology is now treating it as just a performance variable. So it's secular. And the same thing with mindfulness. So when we were reviewing the studies of mindfulness, there's a big boom of mindfulness studies in sports and how that can be used to enhance performance. And some papers are very clear to say that it has nothing to do with Buddhism and it has nothing to do with spirituality. So it's more like a attention control and stress reduction technique. So they are kind of very clear that they want to be separating the concept, which then kind of from a more historical and perspective, thinking of where it came from, it's quite a leap to completely disengage from the Buddhist tradition. But so I think that's also in terms of when we were with Anna and the others trying to figure out how do we kind of situate and talk about our experiences in a more conceptual level, then it's always coming to like the research discourse is kind of pulling you in different directions. So somebody would read our reflections as having nothing spiritual, and somebody else would read it as being like fully every aspect is about spirituality. So it's a big mess how you make sense of it.
Tabata, would you like
to add something? Okay.
Yes, of course, please do.
Yes, because listening to this methodological discussion started by Mr. Adam Frank, I haven't heard anybody mentioning a specific methodological tool that's, from my experience, is quite helpful while conducting any kind of qualitative research based on, especially on auto-reflective or self-reflective documents. And this method is, it's in fact two methods. One is called in the literature usually the sensitizing questions. That is, it basically consists of preparing a sort of a questionnaire of basic question that's going to be asked by authors of, let's say, autoethnographic journals while investigating the practice that they are trying to investigate. And this is helpful in two ways. Firstly, it helps to pinpoint or precise the exact understanding of the terms or the ideas or concepts that are being investigated. And it's also open to other researchers. If you publish these sensitizing questions, then they could clearly see what kind of concepts you are playing with in your research, so they can criticize or agree or basically make meaningful, let's say, contributions to your studies. And the other method is called qualitative coding. And probably it's known to many of you who are working in social sciences. To me, it's quite a new thing because almost nobody in history uses it, which is a shame, I believe, because it's a very, very handy tool. And it's also a way to structure reading personal accounts, documents, I don't know, interview reports, generally textual sources, as well as even iconographical or video material. So yeah, I mean, if any of you is interested in let's say maybe expanding the methodological toolbox, I would suggest it as a nice direction to explore. It helped me a lot, at least. And if I can, I had two other questions. One directly related to the presentation by Mrs. Tabata, and the other one much more general. So regarding Mrs. Tabata's presentation, I wanted to ask two things. First of all, I couldn't find it in your presentation, and unfortunately I missed. I'm with kids now, so I missed some of your explanations here. So I wanted to ask about the method. What was the exact method that you used to gather your data? I mean, these data that were the base for your conclusions. And the other thing is that I found generally your presentation I found very fascinating, and it resonates with my research. And I wanted to ask you whether you considered consulting what's called ecological psychology as developed by James Gibson as a sort of supplement, cognitive supplement to your phenomenological research. So that would be my question. And the general one is I would like to thank Edouard for his remarks on these broad factors influencing the emergence of the sense of spirituality or religion or whatnot. And from your remarks, I started thinking that perhaps the notion of spirituality and the fact that it is something that people discuss and people feel that it is something that exists comes from the fact that when people practice their practices, including martial arts, they very rarely practice only for themselves. They usually feel that they are observed by somebody. It can be the public, but it can be also some spiritual entity, like the God, for example. And I think that something that might be missing that has been missing in my research now, I think, and might be missing in our research in general, is that we usually tend to focus on the practitioner, his partner, and some cultural concepts that surround them. But we sort of skip the third part of the audience. For example, when a martial artist is performing and he's performing to win, this winning can consist of different aspects. It can be winning by physically overcoming the opponent, but there may be other levels to it. For example, in medieval Germany, that is my source of study, there was an unwritten martial ethic that's traceable through analyzing court documents, for example. And it clearly shows that one could... Oh, sorry, it's the kids. Wait a sec.
Thanks, Maciej.
Don't beat them, please.
Is it better now?
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay, so what I wanted to say, it's my final remark, is that in medieval Germany, late medieval Germany, both in when we're talking about the nobility and even when we're talking about craftsmen, burghers, and let's say lower classes, if one, for example, was engaged in a brawl and killed somebody, the way he was treated by the judges heavily depended on the way the killing happened. If he violated this unwritten ethic, for example, in Germany, especially, this ethic was against using the point of the sword, so using the thrust as a move. So if the thrust was what caused death, he would be punished dearly. But if he fought according to the custom and to this ethic, he would probably he could count on judges' leniency. So this is also something that I think is quite important, because these martial ethics, they could emerge from very different, and could be a composition or a mixture of various layers of society, from religion through practical, let's say, safety measures, for example, or concepts of honor that are circulating in a given society, etc. So this would be it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was very, very interesting. Tabata, do you want to answer? I saw you warming up your neck in order to answer.
Sure. Actually, it's hurting a little bit because of training. First, well, when you're talking about ecological perspective and Gibson, yes, sure. I guess it would be a great author to explore. I'm more into cognitive sciences right now because of this perception action processes. So I'm starting with phenomenology, but going more into cognitive sciences to understand it in a broader perspective. And actually, I'm loving the discussions because I love discussions regarding the method. So for me, it's the best in a way part of the research, because for me is the more creative one. So I see method as a way of doing things. So of course we must be very clear and precise about what we're doing, but it doesn't mean that we must keep it rigid. For example, to follow some traditional methodologies, we can do something in a different way, but at the same time, we must be, as I said, clear and precise about what we're doing. So I have two ways of answering these questions. And the first one regarding specifically phenomenology, which is phenomenology is pretty much a matter of philosophy and method. We can't escape that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we have a rigid framework. So I hate it when I see books framing phenomenology as a methodological tool. It's not only a tool. If you're not into this philosophical way of thinking and doing things, so this is not phenomenology. I'm sorry. This is not a toolbox that you open and you just do whenever you want it. No, you must be very linked to this sort of background. And this is not simply, as I said, this is not simply a theory, because it's a background related to philosophy and method. It's a way of thinking and doing things, etc. But at the other side, when we are doing empirical research, usually I was used to do a lot of interviews. So regarding this presentation here specifically, it was from my PhD research, where I did some interviews with karate, capoeira, and MMA fighters. So this was when I first realized this spiritual aspect, as I was telling you, especially with the interview with capoeira. Feeling the magic and the rhythm and so on. This is so good and so strong that I can explain. So I quoted it because I listen to that a lot. So I can explain how it happens, but it's so strong that it makes me do something. But now I changed a little bit, because as a martial art practitioner, sometimes I was observing that even if I was doing an interview, I could understand a few things because I was also practicing it. It was not only because of the interview. there were some other aspects that helped me to understand, to comprehend that situation and the phenomenon that they were describing. So now in my postdoc, I started to practice more, to go into the field. So now I'm exploring different martial arts, and every time I go to a different one, I practice this one. So I do the interviews, but I also practice with the fighters, because for me, it allows me to understand a bit more, especially those pre-reflexive processes. So this is not a closed method right now. I'm starting to build it a little bit, but it's grounded on phenomenology, and also a bit grounded on this cognitive sciences that I'm more into exploring a little bit. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's been, as I said, very nice as the best part of the research, the creative one.
Thank you. So does anyone have an answer for the second question, or an idea or a thought?
The second question was about the third party, right? The idea of kind of always being watched, even if it's not by the public, by the gods, or by things you cannot see but are here, maybe. So if someone wants to give us his insights or her insights on this question, or maybe about the question of the public and competition. No.
I was just thinking about the position of the ethnographer. I mean, the one who observes a phenomenon. I was thinking about what Claude Lévi-Strauss wrote about the distance, the necessary distance that we have to take in order to observe something. And it's very difficult to do when we are investigating in martial arts, and in the same time we are also a practitioner of this martial art. So I don't know what what will be your idea about that, because
what you said, Laurent, just made me think of something which is maybe specific to martial arts studies, is that basically everyone is a practitioner, and sometimes a practitioner before being a scholar, and that's a kind of specific thing to martial art, I guess. There's a few, in the end, few people are researching martial arts without practicing it, and not only practicing it through the lens of participative action like an anthropologist or ethnographer, but as a practitioner. So this questions the problem of objectivity and
yeah, that for me, one of a great example of that is the case of Loïc Vacan, who wrote an ethnography of boxing in Chicago, and he became a boxer, but later in his, I mean, he was a scholar first, and then he became a boxer for 1 year.
But that's kind of rare, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you when we look at his study case, it's very I don't know. You can see in the same time you can see the distance that he's taking from his object, and in the same time you can see the proximity with his object, which allowed us to understand better what he's feeling when practicing boxing. And he has, I mean, it seems that he found the balance between the distance and the proximity.
Yeah, because he has the ability to like create this distance with the practice. But if you're doing something and I don't know how everyone started martial arts or combat sports, but usually you like it, and so you're attracted to this maybe because you've seen Bruce Lee's movies or Shaolin monks movies, and you're attracted to this, and you start doing this, and then you say, well, this is an object of reflection, actually. I could reflect on that. This is my case. And I tend to think it's the case of the most people. This conference.
especially our generation, because we were born in this. In this culture. These movie things, Bruce Lee and Shaolin monks and.
So this question of distance is very problematic. Yeah, Gabriel.
No, I would like to make a point on your question, Lauren, because I guess this is one of my biggest issues with my supervisor, because she's like very concerned about that, like, oh, you're a practitioner and you are doing and you're doing research on what you already do. And then I guess that from this anthropological perspective that I'm working with is very much concerned about how you make the notes of your work, like the data. How can I say? How you work on your data? Like I have all my practice, which is like related to research. I come to make a very specific notebook with all this, the diary of all the things that happen and everything. And then since I'm practicing a different kind of style of a Chinese martial art, what I came to realize when I do take a look on my this field notes from this like kind of almost a year of early research, even though I didn't study specific the kind of field work that I'm going to do, is that it's not that much like similar what I've been doing, which is like kind of discovery. When I take a look again on what happened in the classes and what happened in it's not the same thing that I was supposed to think that, because I guess the major problem with this kind of research when you have like this kind of proximity is like, how do you evaluate your memory? Like I guess in this problem. So I guess the field work works as a method of collecting data. So I kind of I became to be very concerned about that, like in a kind of a very how can I say, very neurotic way, like trying to after the practice or after the end of the day to make the notes in a way that I kind of like record what would just happen. Of course, like already always mixed up with my personal like this. But what I think, and this is a second concern, is that I have a kind of, and this is more a joke than actually a methodological, because I do think that there's a misconception to think that you only have a body when you have like some body technique doing it. Like, I mean, it's not because we are like martial art practitioners that we have a problem with like engaging in research with the body. Like, if you're not a practitioner like Vacuan, as I said before, he has a body before, and there were like bodily practice that he were like socialized with and emerged with. So this body came not to be problematized as our body as researchers and practitioners are. And I give this is a kind of a clue, because I'm not a specialist on it. I just like take a small look, but I was in an event this year on studies of religion here on my university, and there was a kind of very broader discussion on the panel that we were, because they were saying, "Oh, but." Some of the presenters said that the Chinese martial art, Chinese religion, actually, like Buddhism and Taoist here in Rio de Janeiro, they are like a practice of a religion that comes with a very concern on the practice, not in the faith. Like, doesn't matter what you believe, but what you do, like the practice of meditation, this kind of stuff. And then another presenter said, "Whoa, Catholic Church is just the same. Catholic Church is all bodily practices, like to bend on your knee, how do you make the praying, all bodily practice. The problem is like the problem is theoretically, because when you take a look on Western religions, we don't take a look at the body on their religion. And I guess that we do have like this kind of, I don't know if it makes sense to you, but for me it's just like a concern, like I'm just like take a look, which happens to be the same point of the question about the audience, I guess, because when you do have a competition, it's obvious that you have an audience and you have like someone evaluating your practice. But when you're doing by yourself, it's also a social relation, this kind of stuff. Because when you do it by yourself, you're not taking the practice from nowhere. Like you have like the instruction of a master that you had someday, the cosmological, cosmological in this way, like the way to organize the vision, like cosmovision from the way, like, so if you only the way that you think about your body, right? So for me, like the hips, the this kind of yaw. There wasn't a part of my body before Tai Chi Chuan. It was like, I do have like the leg, I have the center of the body, but I didn't have like this. This is a new part of my anatomy because I discovered it has a specific sense in this. This is a social relation to like how to describe the body, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I just had a thought. Because you started to talk about Lévi-Strauss, and then the idea of watching a practice from the outside and to be able to study it, and so it's very much what was happening with my area of studies, which is indigenous literature. And for a very long time, indigenous people were not given a voice because there was a lack of objectivity according to academia. But when you really give a voice to the insiders, you can reconceptualize really the field of study. So it must be the same thing with martial arts studies, that when you have the insider's perspective, it really enables you to reveal the faults and what is missing in canonical studies on martial arts that are purely empirical and without this intimate knowledge of the practice. That's just my thought.
Yeah.
So, if I would have a question, is it something new? Because I'm not very familiar, but is it something new to have academic studies from people who also practice the martial arts, or was it something that was always done, or was there a time when it was purely theoretical or from an outsider's perspective?
From a methodological perspective, it's not something new actually, because
we're about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It's okay. We can go on, I guess.
Actually,
you're the master of time.
Actually, I have another panel, the panel 6.
Okay, so we won't be recorded if we go on.
Yeah, right. So okay. we can talk like a few more minutes. I mean, like 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then I got to go, but.
Okay. So please go on.
No. I was just thinking about what Fanny just said just now, and it's not something very new, because in the tradition of anthropology we have the participant observation, right? So it's something that we apply in other contexts, not only in martial arts.
But is it are the observers the same as the researcher creating the study, or just the researcher using the participants' observations?
I think it would be kind of clear if you put the same situation in the case of religious studies.
Yeah.
Is it relevant for a Buddhist monk to produce a social scientific study of Buddhism? It's the same problem.
Yeah.
So I think we have to think about it this way, because it happens a lot in religious studies, actually. You have great scholars of every religious traditions who are actually people involved in this specific religious system, etc. And it sometimes can be a problem if we can see some problems of objectivity in it. But sometimes it's just wonderful research. So I guess it depends on the case. I don't know. Would you like to add something? Please turn on your mic and just talk freely, please.
I wanted to add just a story that I crystallized this problem for me in the fieldwork in Shanghai. And that I was practicing in the park one day. At that time, I was practicing probably 6 hours a day during the field work. Pretty intensive practice. I thought it was getting pretty good. And this older Chinese gentleman was watching my practice that day. And when I was finished, he said, "Hey, it doesn't look bad. Too bad you'll never understand because you're not Chinese."
Oh.
And my response at first was, I was inside, it was angry. I said, well, of course I understand. I practice all the time. But as an anthropologist, I had to accept his viewpoint as probably true and largely true. But as a martial artist, I had to reject his viewpoint because then there was no reason for me to be practicing so hard, right? And so I think that question became an important methodological moment. And there was another older gentleman, a lot of older gentlemen would watch people practice in the park, who said to me after practice, you, sir, are a sinologist. And he said that with a certain sarcasm. And when I got to know him a little better, he really thought there was something a little wrong with this Orientalist viewpoint. And that went back to his experience under colonial influence in Shanghai in the 30s and 40s. And so I think those moments and those comments are frustrating. But, we sometimes learn the most methodologically from the biggest assholes, right? Who comment on our work, but they're right, so just a comment. But
it could be true for the scholar world too, I guess.
Well, it's a good story. Thanks for that.
Yeah, a last question or comment? Yeah, please.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
One thing, the religious scholar writing, which is has always been there everywhere in Christianity, in Taoism, in Buddhism, has always not only asked about the cosmology, but also about the role of the person inside this cosmology. And then, of course, the role of the person who writes about it, because the only thing how he could talk about persons was taking himself and the people he knew as a template for what he did. When we as practitioners go out there and and when we go out there, we manage to get out of this echo chamber, like when you always stay with one style and say my style is the best and the others are you don't really have to care about it. As soon as you open yourself to the outside in what you do and to other aspects of thinking, to other martial arts, to other theories, to other kinds of scientific, and like you all did, and I myself too, how much does this influence my scientific view on what I'm doing? As long as this happens and we talk about this again and again, I think the danger of this is relatively small, as long as we stay open for new ideas, for new inputs, even if they come from an asshole, as we just heard.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Excuse me, I have to go to the panel 6. By the way, you are welcome to join if you have time, and we can continue the discussion on the panel 6.
Of course, let's do this. I'd just like to thank everyone. It was, I think, in my opinion, a wonderful discussion. Everyone had the opportunity to express herself or himself. Yeah, it was really good. Fanny, would you like to say something? Last word?
The same. Thank you so much. It was very enriching for me, who comes from a different background, but it was. I really appreciate it.
Don't hesitate to continue the discussion by email, or I think we'll meet somewhere again someday.
Yeah.
So stay safe, continue to practice hard, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 So actually, do I come to the stage?